Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next parent webinar. Today, we're going to talk about managing challenging behavior. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We're planning to do more sessions on this topic, but we just wanted to give you an overview of why behavior happens and some strategies, but we will continue to provide parent training on this because there is no quick fix. Ms. Troyer, if you want to take it away from here.
All right. So these are our objectives for today's webinar. First, we're going to talk about and define what problem behavior is. Then we're going to talk about some of the basic principles of behavior, some terms that you guys will want to be familiar with going forward. Then we'll review why behavior happens and why it could continue. Then we're going to get into proactive strategies in reducing and changing behavior. And then we're going to do some active engagement with some case study practice. So what is problem behavior? So problem behavior can be defined as interfering with one's own learning or the learning of others. So interfering with one's own learning can look like, maybe you're having self-stimulatory behavior, like wiggling your fingers or flapping your arms that you're engaging in a lot more than the task at hand. Or it could look like refusal for long periods of time, and you're, again, refusing to do the task at hand. Interfering with the learning of others could be disruptive behaviors to the whole group. Maybe you're taking peers' pencils and you're breaking them, and you're interfering with your peers. So some other things that we look at other than the interfering behaviors is the social implications for the individual. These aren't necessarily behaviors that interfere with one's own learning or the learning of others, but they could potentially have long-term effects socially and on peer relationships for the individual. So these can look like walking away from peers, lying, name calling, hypersensitivity to loud noises, and you still want to address these in a positive behavior support plan. And a lot of these can be addressed in social skills, but we can also use some of the behavior interventions outlined in PBSPs to address social implications as well. So when problem behavior is identified, what do we do? So the first thing we want to do is figure out why that behavior is happening. And we do that through an analysis based on function. So this is going to require intervention and direct teaching of what the appropriate skill is going to be. So we're going to extinguish or replace the challenging behavior and come up with a more appropriate behavior to replace it. These interventions should be driven from applied behavior analysis and be using evidence-based practices. They also may require an FBA or a PBSP. So the biggest thing we need to do as educators, as parents, as professionals, as peers to some of these kids, we need to change our thinking about behavior. And these are some different ways that we can start to shift our lens. So instead of saying Johnny is lazy, we can look at what are his interests, what can I use to motivate him, why is he lazy? What are some things that I can change to make him motivated? Instead of saying Sue's a bad kid, so disrespectful, we can look at Sue's environment, what might be contributing to her behavior. Maybe she didn't eat breakfast that morning. Maybe she had a poor night of sleep. Find blame in explanatory fiction, full moon, what month, season they were born. I'll hear a lot of people go, oh, it's a full moon today, and they kind of blame that on the kid's behavior. But we need to kind of shift that lens to looking at the present and what's happening right now in the environment, the antecedents, the consequences. Maybe there's a change in routine that day, and not blaming those kind of explanatory fictions. So you also want to allow your personal beliefs and how you were raised, keep them to the side, and you want to utilize the principles of reinforcement, use prevention strategies, extinction to change problem behavior, and increase those replacement skills that are outlined a lot in your child's positive behavior support plan. And then do not blame or punish. You want to be a problem solver, and we always say, and we kind of touched base on this a little bit in our last training, is it's always the adult's fault. We should never blame the learner. We should never blame the child. There's always something that we can do to shift our mindset to change the environment and make conditions better for the student. All Right, so some basic principles going forward that are going to be important for you guys to have a good foundational knowledge of going forward is going to be reinforcement. So this is something that's going to increase the future probability of a specific behavior. So if we're looking at tying your shoes, so I tie my shoes and immediately after tying my shoes, my parents praise me. In the future, I continue tying my shoes independently. So that social praise from parent is going to be your reinforcement because it increased my probability of tying my shoes in the future. Punishment is something that's going to decrease the future probability of a specific behavior. So again, with tying shoes, I'm going to be tying my shoes and maybe this time I'm getting really bad hand cramps, and every time I go to tie my shoes, I get bad hand cramps and never complete tying my shoes. So now that hand cramp served as punishment and I'm going to stop tying my shoes altogether because every time it delivered punishment and not reinforcement. So I stopped tying my shoes altogether. An antecedent is something that occurs right before the behavior. So my shoes are untied. My shoes are untied, or my parents might say, you need to tie your shoes. The behavior is what the person does. So that's going to be the shoe tying. And then the consequence is something that occurs right after the behavior. So with the shoe tying example, again, the consequence could be either reinforcement, that social praise from your parents, or your shoes are totally tied and you can, walk freely again without tripping, or you can get the consequence, or the consequence could be punishment where you're continually getting that hand cramp. But those all come directly after the behavior. All right, so reinforcement is the way to go. We did briefly touch on punishment, but typically in your child's positive behavior support plans, punishment is not a procedure that is used in school-based setting. And reinforcement is definitely the biggest and most used strategy in schools.
And there are a few reasons we can't use punishment, and some of them are legal. We have to show that we're exhausting, all positive and reinforcement strategies and prevention strategies before we're allowed to utilize punishment. Punishment is very effective, but it's very misused. And if you're not trained, if you don't have the right knowledge, if you're not trained, if you're still not using a function-based approach, then punishment is just going to have a lot of side effects, and it's going to make things really worse. And you could be putting that child in danger. You could be putting people around them in danger. When we utilize punishment, and especially when we misuse it, there are a lot of side effects. We're not going to go into that in this presentation. But there are a lot of side effects to punishment after you implement them that can create worsening or more intense and more increases in problem behavior. So that's why just overall, it's not the first thing we go to. We only kind of use it as a last resort. But it's still a very effective principle. It just has to be utilized in the right way. In school-based, we really are not allowed to use it unless we've exhausted it all and we've gotten, parent permission and agreement to put it into a behavior plan.
Kim?
So this next slide is this is a little handout from Sasha. She's the autism helper. She's really well known and she's a great resource. If you do use social media or if you're looking for, websites and things to get some information from, she is a behavior analyst. She was a special education teacher first. She's been around for a while and she's really grown a nice platform. She does a lot of webinars. She offers a lot of resources. And this one here is a resource that she offered, and it just reminds 5 ways you're using reinforcement. And reinforcement's another kind of principle that is a little bit of a misconception right now, and thinking that it's our generation and everybody gets a trophy and we don't discipline enough, or we don't reprimand, and we're raising kids differently than how they were raised. I put all that aside. That's not what behavior analysts are trying to disseminate. Reinforcement, there's only a few ways you're going to know that you're actually using reinforcement. It doesn't just mean give a trophy to everybody and everything someone does should be praised. No, it means you're providing something after something good that you want to see happen in the future occurs. So anything you want to strengthen, anything you want to increase, you're going to follow it with reinforcement. And a lot of our reinforcement is natural. You turn the key to your car and your car starts. Your car starting is reinforcement. That's natural reinforcement. That's the end goal of what we want for all of our kids, is just to thrive on natural reinforcement. But the fact is, we don't just thrive on natural reinforcement. We still use money and tangible and attention from other people. We still rely a lot on those reinforcers. So it's important to make sure it's really the biggest intervention that should be a part in anything that we do all day, and what really drives what we do. So here's our 5 ways to know that you're using it correctly and that it's actually working. So if you are providing reinforcement after you see the behavior you want, the positive behavior, you know you're utilizing reinforcement. Reinforcement shouldn't come before the thing you want to see. It should come after. If you see more positive behaviors in the future, you're seeing what you want to see from your child, then you know you're using reinforcement in the right way. There's not a requirement of stopping a negative behavior. And this is how reinforcement's often used. If you don't have the knowledge or you don't have the training, we use something called bribery, and that you're just trying, your child's crying in the grocery store and you say, okay, if you stop crying, I'm going to get you candy when we go to the checkout. That's not reinforcement. You're talking about something they love while they're engaging in problem behavior. Reinforcement should always follow the positive behavior. There should be no discussion, no showing. Remember, what are you working for? Remember, what are you earning? That should not happen in the middle of problem behavior as a way to stop the problem behavior from happening. It might work. It might be a quick fix in stopping it, but now you strengthened the wrong behavior and you're going to see more crying in the future. So it should not ever be used as a way to stop a negative behavior. Also, the positive behavior of the child is what benefits the adult. So a lot of times bribery tends to benefit the adult in terms of it's stopping that behavior that you don't want to see. If you're just using it to stop it because you can't stand the crying or you don't want to be embarrassed in the grocery store, you're benefiting yourself. You're not benefiting your child. So you want to make sure when you're using reinforcement that it's the child who's benefiting from it. You're improving their behaviors in the future. You're not stopping something because you don't like it. And there should be minimal negotiation happening when you're using reinforcement. And if that's happening, then you know you're utilizing it the right way. You're using preferred items, attention, whatever it might be, right after the desired behavior. There should be no negotiation. You shouldn't have to say, well, come on, keep going, and you'll really get this great thing. Or, well, I told you you could only have a piece of a cookie. I mean, I guess you could have one whole cookie. And now you're getting into a whole negotiation. No, you just want to immediately follow the behavior you want to see with something that child really likes or would be motivated by. So again, beware of reinforcement versus bribery. This is a really hot topic with staff we work with and with parents and really the community. A lot of times you hear people say, I always have to bribe my kid to get them to do things, or bribery is great. Use bribery and your kids will do anything. It's different. You want to use reinforcement, not bribery, and those two things are not the same. And the other thing you want to be aware of are extinction bursts, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This is a little visual to let you know what are the differences between reinforcement and bribery. So reinforcement, again, it's going to follow a positive behavior that you want to see in the future. So they're earned. You get access to them because you did something really great, or you did something and then something happens, again, like the car starting. That came after I turned my key. So now I'm always going to turn my key to start my car. So it comes after a behavior you want to see in the future. It's going to create a long-lasting positive behavior. You're not doing it to stop something negative. You're doing it to change and build a positive behavior that will last and sustain for the rest of their life. It's planned ahead of time. So you know going into it, what reinforcement is going to come after that behavior happens. Sometimes we use promise reinforcers with your children, or I recommend use in the home. That means you're letting them know something could be available if you see something. So, remember, when you are sitting at the table keeping hands to yourself, you can earn a token, or you can earn a point, or you can earn a few minutes of a break. If you don't, then this is going to happen and you're going to lose your reward. You're letting them know ahead of time before any behavior happens, before anything starts, just to kind of increase their motivation a little bit, know what's there. But if they don't exhibit that behavior, you're not delivering it, and you're not reminding them in the moment when problem behavior starts. The other thing, the adult is the one who's in control of deciding if that reward or if that reinforcement has been earned. There's no negotiation. When you're talking about bribery, bribes are really given in response to a challenging behavior to try and stop. There's coercion that can go with bribery. You're trying to change the behavior in the moment, but you don't care about changing it kind of in the future. You just want something to stop. You want a quick fix. You're offering it just because you're frustrated, and it's your way to kind of change the situation. It's very reactive. There's no planning to it. You're just kind of throwing it out there in hopes that you're going to change or stop something you don't want to see. And the child's really in control. They control that whole situation when you're utilizing bribery. It's not plan ahead. It's not the adult who's giving access. It's the child. They exhibit a certain behavior, then you talk about what could happen if they stop it, and then they might stop it, and then they got what they wanted. So they kind of manipulated that and made that negotiation. So you really want to stay away from those signs of using bribery rather than using reinforcement. Here's an example of what bribery might look like. So you go to the grocery store with your child, they start crying, screaming, knocking things off the shelf. Then you offer them, well, if you stop and you're good the rest of the time, we're going to go to McDonald's. They stop the tantrum immediately, you stop shopping, and then they go to McDonald's. Now what you've done, you haven't used any reinforcement. There's no positive behaviors that are going to happen the next time that you go to the grocery store. And most likely, you're going to see that whole chain of negative behaviors in hopes that you're going to say, oh, if you stop, you're going to get a lollipop, or we'll go to McDonald's. That green line there is showing, you go to the grocery store with your child, they're good the whole time in the grocery store, you finish grocery shopping and you all go home. What some extra reinforcement, if you do need, could look like if you do see some behaviors with your child in the grocery store. The next slide is going to show you what that chain would look like there.
I think too, this green arrow is kind of showing that reinforcement, nothing was used when the kid was good in the store. So they went the whole time being great in the store and got nothing. But when they started crying, screaming, knocking things off the shelf, now better things come.
Perfect. So the bigger payoff was for the problem behavior, and there was no payoff for the appropriate behavior. So why am I going to remain good the entire time if there is no payoff and we just go home? But McDonald's is offered when I exhibit these problem behaviors. So I'm going to choose that. There's a bigger payoff for me. Whereas you can change and plan ahead of time and let your child know, okay, we're going to go in the grocery store. Remember, I need you to behave well. I need you to, listen to mommy, stay in the cart, stay close to me, whatever it is that you're trying, whatever behave well means for your child. We're going to go to McDonald's afterwards. Okay. So then they're good the whole time in the grocery store. You finish grocery shopping and you say, awesome. Now it's time to go to McDonald's. You did great. Whereas if crying, screaming, knocking things off the shelf happens, there is no reminder of McDonald's. You continue shopping. You're going to redirect behaviors. You might say, you need to stay with me. You might have to go into the cart. You might have to leave the store and then come back in. But you're not going to talk about McDonald's. You're not going to talk about their behavior. You're not going to leave the store completely because now you just reinforced escape behavior, which I'll talk about in a little bit. You're just going to finish grocery shopping and go home. And if you want to talk about it, you can say you get McDonald's when you behave well. This time you did not, so we left the store and we came home. So that's really the chain that you want to be showing. You want the big payoff to come for the positive behaviors, and you want little to no payoff coming from problem behavior.
And just to add to, I think, looking, being in a grocery store with your kids and these behaviors come out, there are social implications for that. And us as adults want to turn that off as quick as possible. We don't want to have a screaming child or a kid that's throwing things off the shelf. But and something Kim's going to talk about next is extinction bursts, and that behavior does get worse, as interventions are in place. But long-term or short-term gain is long-term pain, is what I always tell my staff. If there is something that is quick in the moment that's going to turn off behavior, then you are setting yourself and the child up for failure in the long run. Just keep that in mind going forward. We know that, it's not ideal to have your kids screaming in the store, and it's easier said than done, but it is worth it.
Yes, and we have a lot. I know we have some of our kids now, and some parents that struggle now. They don't even go in the grocery store. Now they don't even go anywhere because the behavior has gotten so worse over time that we just aren't going to go there. And when you start going down that path, you live a path or a life that's very constricted and restricted, and you start to shelter and you start to be afraid to go places because the behavior got worse and worse and worse because we've reinforced it and it's strengthened. Like Bree just said, short-term gain, long-term pain. If you are going to stop it in the moment, it's going to get worse and you're never going to be able to go to those places out in public. So you have to make sure you're addressing it the right way so you don't start to live that life that's really restricted and you can't go anywhere with your child now. Because imagine when now they're older, they're teenagers, they're in high school, they're bigger. That behavior is going to be a lot harder to manage, and no wonder you don't want to go places because it's scary and you're afraid that they might hurt somebody out in the community or they might hurt you, and it's harder to control. So you have to, make sure you learn now, do the right things now so you're preventing that from happening. We want strategies that are going to give us that long-term gain, not going to stop it in the moment. And we might have to, as parents, deal with a little bit of internal feelings like embarrassment. People are staring at me. They're probably thinking all these things about me. Who cares? If you know you're doing the right thing in the moment, keep doing that because you're only bettering your child in the long run. So extinction burst. This is probably the biggest thing that deters people from following these interventions and what we recommend, because it will get worse before it gets better. Now, what we just talked about is it getting worse. If it gets worse and continues to get worse, that's not an extinction burst. That's the behavior has been reinforced and it's strengthening over time. But if you're implementing the right interventions, boom, it gets really, really bad and then it starts to get better. And here's the reason for it. So really an extinction burst is when we stop reinforcing the problem behavior. And that's going to make a little bit more sense the more we go in this presentation. So if I cry and scream in the grocery store to leave or to get access to candy, now all of a sudden, mom and dad, they know better. They're saying, well, we're continuing to shop, and you move on and you continue and you're not giving any attention. You're not giving them reminders of going to McDonald's. You're not leaving the grocery store. They're going to now do everything they can to try and get you to change your mind. I might start swiping things off the shelf. I'm going to cry even more. I'm going to yell things. I'm going to start using inappropriate language. I'm going to start hitting you. If it gets worse before it gets better, you're actually doing the right thing. And that little graph there on the left-hand side, that's what we want. That's what I want when I'm looking at everybody's data. I want it to look like that. I want to see a big spike, and we prepare staff for it. And parents, you should be prepared too to know you do it once or twice and you're saying, well, that just made it worse. I'm not doing that anymore. No, that just made it worse. I'm going to keep doing it because really, really soon it's going to get really better. You want to get to that point where it starts to get better, but you're not going to get there until you see a burst. That's just how human behavior works. If I've done something for so long and it worked for me and now all of a sudden it doesn't work, you better believe I'm going to engage in different behaviors to get it to work. And oftentimes I talk about when you're at the vending machine and all of a sudden one day, it doesn't give you your snack. What do? You might shake the vending machine. You might kick the vending machine. You might go ask somebody for more money to put in the vending machine if that was your last money to get it out. You're going to engage in a bunch of different responses that you didn't have to before because the vending machine gave you your snack, but now it's not. And your behavior is not getting reinforced. You're going to engage in different responses. Same thing if you were used to a car key to start your car and now you have a push button. Sometimes it takes us a long time to remember, oh, I don't have my key. Oh, I don't have to have my key. I don't have to start it. I have to push this button. You have to change your behavior. If you need someone to answer your phone call and they always do, but now they're not, and you're in an emergency, you start to panic a little bit more. You're going to engage in different responses. You might call them like 50 times now in a row, or text and call them, or call, a different person, a family member, to get in touch with them. Same thing, our computer freezes. Our presentation isn't working. Zoom's not working. We're going to get frustrated and we're going to engage in different behaviors. It's no different than when your child used to cry and get a cookie and now he doesn't anymore. He's going to start kicking, pushing you, hitting you, crying harder until you start to learn the more appropriate way to get that cookie. So an extinction burst is normal. Expect it to happen. There's ways to minimize it and we still keep kids safe, but it means that you're on the right path. There are challenges, like we've talked about. It's aversive. You don't want to see your child engaging in now even worse behaviors or more intense behaviors, or putting someone else in harm or themselves in harm if they engage in self-injurious behavior. And now that behavior is worse, and now they're hurting themselves and they're injuring themselves. There are similar side effects to extinction than there are punishment. So you have to be really careful. And again, you have to have the knowledge and the training to make sure you're implementing it the right way. But it's very easy for us to say this isn't working, that made it worse, it goes against our human nature. We want the intervention that stops it right away and gives that quick fix. And when it comes to human behavior, that does not exist. There is no quick fixes, and if I give you something that's a quick fix, I'm making your life worse in the future, and I can't do that. So you kind of have to ride out the extinction burst. There's definitely ways to navigate it if it's too intense. There's professionals, behavior analysts, teachers, whomever that have good training that can lessen that and still keep kids safe, so we can deal with extinction in the right way. But I know why people don't want to do it. It can be more disruptive. I have a lot of teachers that say, well, now it's worse, and what do you want me to do? They're in a classroom with 25 other students. It's really disruptive. All those things we can navigate together, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to start reinforcing the problem behavior again. No, I know that that's going to make it worse. So I can lessen the challenges of an extinction burst, but the extinction burst is still going to happen in order to get behaviors to improve. So now we're going to get into why behavior happens, and we're going to keep talking about all those things we just talked about and make a little bit more sense of them. So behaviors serve 4 functions, whether they're problem behavior or not. Appropriate behavior, all behavior serves these same 4 functions. We engage in things because either they give us our own reinforcement. We call that sensory. We put this little visual here to help you remember. SEAT. That acronym SEAT allows you to remember those 4 functions. It doesn't rely on others. You don't need any other person. This is the only function that you don't need any other person in order to have this function of behavior. It's self-reinforcing. It either relieves something you're feeling aversive, like when you scratch a bug bite, scratching behavior is reinforced because it relieves the itch. That would be considered sensory. Also known as automatic reinforcement, self-stimulation. Those are all kind of the same terms you might hear when you're talking about that function of behavior. It doesn't rely on others. So nothing really going on, but Johnny's shaking his foot over and over and over again. There is no real consequence in the environment. It's just, for some reason, he does it. He likes it, feels good, helps alleviate something, makes him more comfortable, whatever it might be. Your second function is escape, and that is when you are doing that behavior because it takes away or avoids an aversive, something you don't like that's happening. You engage in this escape behavior so you can either avoid it or it goes away. So I don't like math. My math paper is given. I rip it up and I put it in the trash, and now the math paper is removed. I see traffic ahead, or I see traffic on my Waze app. I'm going a different route and I'm avoiding it altogether. That's escape behavior. Attention, that's behavior that you're doing in order to get access to attention from somebody else. So if someone walks away from you, maybe Johnny screams when his teacher walks away, the teacher comes back and asks him what's wrong, gives him a hug. It could be that you're talking to somebody else, your child starts crying, and then you hug and lots of attention. And then the last behavior is our function is tangible. Those are behaviors we engage in order to get things that we want. Tangible items. So I don't have something that I want. I cry and grab for it. Now I get what I want. I don't have something that I want. I ask for it, or I pay money for it, and now I get what I want. So again, appropriate behavior or problem behavior, it doesn't matter. Everything we do is based on these 4 functions. So going into now talking about those specific 4 functions, we're going to talk about escape a little bit. Escape maintain behavior, again, that's your fancy word. Your layman word is we just do it because we want to avoid something we don't like, or we want to get out of or get away from something or someone we don't like. So here's a couple examples. Math problem comes up on the screen. Bree says, nope, too hard, hits the computer, I'm out of here. Consequence would be the teacher and parent end the session. So the thing that makes that behavior going to happen in the future, again, is the consequence. It's not necessarily the antecedent that the math problem comes up. It's the fact that I got to escape it because I said, no, it's too hard, I'm done. And then my teacher and the parent ended my virtual session. Behavior reinforced. I got out of what I didn't want to do by engaging in that behavior. Now it's more likely I'm going to do that in the future. Why wouldn't I? It worked for me. There was a payoff. All I had to do was say, nope, it's too hard, or hit my computer and shut it. My work went away. I'm going to keep doing that in the future. It worked. What we would want to teach instead, the math problem comes up on the screen. Bree says, can I just do one problem? Absolutely. You used your word, you communicated. Sure, let's just do one math problem today. That's escape behavior. She communicated it, got out of it, but it's socially appropriate, and that's the difference. We all engage in these behaviors for these functions, but we know the more socially appropriate way to do that most of the time. So you want, that's what we want to do with our interventions, is switch it. What can we teach that still serves the same function? And that's why the most important thing to do first when you're dealing with challenging behavior is determine why it's happening, what makes it happen, and what's making it continue. Makes it happen during antecedent, what's making it continue in the future is your consequence. You have to know that first. Because like our little meme here says, if a behavior is happening, like throwing things, refusing, and you just tell them to go take a time out, you just removed the work, they escaped. That time out is not doing anything but making it more likely your child's going to engage in that future or in that behavior in the future. So we have to know why things are happening, because our interventions are going to be different. Some things that, again, escape behavior might look like or sound like, there's a whole list of behaviors there on the left. What you'll notice is a lot of those behaviors, like elopement, aggression, they're going to be on every slide for every function, because the behavior can look the same but still serve a different function. And that is why we don't have this one method, this fix-all for every challenging behavior. We couldn't do that, because we do things for different reasons. And if we tried to just say break or a sensory room or go to the calm down corner for every behavior that happens when a child escalates, we are most likely making that problem behavior happen more in the future. And now we have kids running to calm down corners and asking for sensory breaks. That's not the way to do it. You have to know why behaviors are happening and then choose your intervention. But those are some things that it could look or sound like. And then there's some common antecedents for escape behavior, always going to be something you see, hear, or know that's happening that you don't like, that you want to avoid, or that you want to escape. Long lines, waiting, big social events if you don't like crowds. Some of these things aren't going to bother me. I'm not going to engage in escape behavior, but we're all different. One person may not like large crowds. They may have a problem with waiting. My husband is one of those people. He will not wait in a line. He sees a line, he is avoiding it altogether. He doesn't wait once we get that check and we're trying to pay. He's outside. I'm the one left with the bill to pay because he can't tolerate that waiting. So he might engage in some escape behaviors with long lines or waiting, but I don't mind it, so I won't. But these are common antecedents, and anything that you see, hear, or know that's going to be aversive to you, you might engage in escape or avoidance behavior. Attention seeking. Those are the behaviors that happen because you want someone to look, laugh, listen to you, give you that attention, give you that social interaction back and forth. There's appropriate ways to get attention, and then there's problem behaviors at work for you to get attention. One example right now is my own daughter with all these Zoom calls and meetings I've had. I might be talking on the phone, or I might be in a meeting. She screams, she pulls on my shirt, she throws something at me. Now I'm turning to talk to her, or I'm turning just to give her that mom look that I shouldn't be giving her, or I'm turning to reprimand her. All of that is attention. When you're dealing with attention-seeking behavior, the most important thing to know is it doesn't matter if it's a reprimand, your evil parent look, or your glare, your teacher glare, talking to them, giving them a hug. It doesn't matter what form of attention is happening. It will still reinforce it. Reprimand, negative or positive attention. You have to keep that in mind. Well, I'm reprimanding them, I'm yelling at them. It should not. Who wants that? Plenty of kids love it. My daughter will laugh in my face if I turn to her and give her my mom glare. She's chasing her brother all around right now and he's screaming and crying because she thinks it's hilarious. It's still attention. Doesn't matter what form. Now I'm trying to teach her when I'm talking on the phone or I'm in a call, she says, "Excuse me, mommy." Then I'll turn to talk to her. So screaming and crying is not going to work anymore, but if you say, "Excuse me," I'll give you attention. So I'm trying to teach her the right way to get attention. Common attention-seeking behaviors are calling out. We see this a lot in the classroom. Calling out, telling jokes, making some inappropriate, funny social comments, raising your hand is an appropriate way to get attention, asking for a hug, throwing things at somebody, hitting someone. Self-injurious behavior could be attention-seeking. Posting a selfie or a comment on social media, lots of attention you're going to get for that. And then those antecedents that really evoke attention-seeking behavior, when you have limited attention, when you're feeling like and you're craving attention because no one is really paying attention to you. Maybe your parents are busy, they're working. Right now, our kids aren't getting as much attention from us. They might be having a hard time with that. You might see more behaviors. So limited attention from a teacher, parent, they're busy, they're talking to someone else, they're present, but they're not engaging with you. They are walking away from you. The other thing that can be deceiving when you're looking at function, being presented with something challenging can also be attention seeking and not necessarily escape. So if someone gives me a tough task or someone gives me something I don't know, or I missed the directions, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look around. I'm going to engage in off task, or I'm going to kind of throw something on the ground, because when I did that, my teacher or my parent came over and asked me if I needed help. And they gave me assistance. They gave me attention in the form of help and teacher assistance, rather than me saying, "I need help. What were the directions again? I missed the direction." We engaged in problem behavior because it worked. If it's going to work, we're going to keep doing it in the future. So that's another antecedent that sometimes people think escape behavior is happening, and it's really not. Access to tangible, our third function. That's, again, those behaviors we engage in to get something that we want. And I love this funny meme on the side. I think it's funny. How do you get that behavior to stop? Simple. I just give him his teddy bear when he cries. And then, you know, your babies are saying there, "Just cry every time the mom gives you a teddy bear." So it's behaviors that happen when you want access to something that you don't currently have. We do that by paying money at a store to get the items that we need, to get the groceries that we need. We ask for things that we want. We might call somebody, send an email, whatever we can to get access to the things that we need or that we want. So here's your antecedents. Steve's mom said no to getting ice cream, so Steve dropped to the ground and cried, and now Steve's mom said, "Okay, we'll go when I'm done work." So why is Steve gonna drop to the ground and cry in the future? Because it worked for him. Immediately following was access to something that he wanted. What we would want to change instead, Steve's mom said no to getting ice cream. So Steve said, "Okay," or maybe tomorrow. Now Steve's going to get ice cream because he did the right thing. Mom praised him. He accepted no. Sure, why don't we go get ice cream tomorrow? That's a more appropriate way to get what you want when you're communicating it. And we can reinforce and honor that. Some things, again, these behaviors on the left could also serve escape, could also serve Attention. So it's not about what the behavior looks like that's going to tell you why it's happening. It's what follows. It's that consequence. What did they get out of it? What was the payoff? A lot of antecedents that evoke that those tangible type behaviors are if something's out of reach and they can't get it. I might climb to get it, climb on top of the counter, reach for it, take it from somebody else. If another person has something that you want, that's a common antecedent to access to tangible behavior. You were told you can't have something that you want. You're told no, you have to wait for something. All of those antecedents could evoke behaviors that we engage in order to get something that we want. And then your last one is that sensory self-stimulation, fancy terms, automatic reinforcement. So we do it because it feels good, or it removes something that doesn't feel good. So there doesn't necessarily have to be a specific antecedent. It could just be things are in front of me, I pick it up and I put it in my mouth, because mouthing items gives me some form of sensory or self-stimulation. Same thing, I have a bug bite on my arm, so I scratch it over and over and over again, because itching is relieving a feeling that I don't like. So again, your stereotypy, that behavior is going to be different than most functions, although sometimes stereotypy can serve other functions. A lot of times it is because it provides some type of sensory input. So those are your repetitive movements or vocalizations: hand flapping, pacing, jumping up and down, scripted talk, TV talk, wiggling my fingers, chewing gum, all of those, whatever it looks like, any repetitive movement or vocalization. Scratching a bug bite, that's a sensory seeking behavior or automatic reinforcement. Putting aloe on sunburn, that relieves some pain that you might be feeling from sunburn. Chewing gum, nail biting, picking, tapping your foot. Some self-injurious behavior is self-reinforcing. You're getting self-stimulation, or it's removing something. If you have a headache and I don't have the way to ask, I can't tell anybody I have a headache. I can't ask anybody for Tylenol. I'm going to engage in this because maybe it stops my head from hurting. Not always. Again, self-injurious behavior happens for a lot of other reasons, but it is possible. It does happen as a way to get access to own reinforcement or stop some type of pain from happening. Common antecedents for this, it's different. This behavior is different than the other ones. There might not be a clear antecedent, because again, it doesn't have to be mediated by another person or something necessarily in the environment. But there are certain, what I call setting events, which is basically just things that are going to make it more likely to occur. Large group instruction, because there's less engagement in large group instruction, or we don't like the group instruction, or it's too challenging, or the teacher or the presenter is talking about something we don't find interesting, we're going to engage in some self-stimulatory behavior. Checking our email, our pacing back and forth, getting up and going to the bathroom, shaking your foot, chewing gum, tapping your pen. That might all happen in large group instruction or a lecture that is just non-preferred. Training or meeting that's not motivating or interesting, you're going to engage in other behaviors. Internal factors, we can't measure these. Only that person knows. And that's what gets really tricky about our students that have limited vocal behavior or limited verbal behavior, because they can't express to us if there's something they are feeling anxious about, if they're feeling pain, if they're fearful of something. All those internal factors, only that person knows, only they can express to us. And a lot of times we can see inappropriate behaviors, and it really is because they're feeling something internally and we don't know. And we see increases in behaviors because of it. Or they're engaging in them to try to relieve the way that they're feeling inside. Environments where those internal factors are more likely to occur, like a doctor's office, a dentist's office. You might feel more anxious going into a doctor's office or a dentist's office, or a high intense meeting, something where there's a lot of pressure, a crisis. If you're delivering a speech and you don't like public speaking, you might start to feel anxious, you might start to feel fearful, and now you're engaging in other behaviors like, I don't know, getting up and pacing, or again, your foot's tapping, or you're clicking a pen in your hand, whatever it is. But there are environments where you might see increases in these behaviors, and that's what we look when we're looking at these type of self-stimulatory behaviors. We look if there are places or locations that they happen more. All right, so now the strategy part, and this is a very brief list that we're going to give you because we're intending to continue this and talk about this more in the future, but we wanted to give you some quick strategies that are the most important, in my opinion, to prevent these behaviors from happening for each function and increasing replacement behaviors. So for proactive strategies, there really are 3 steps to changing any behavior. And that's after, again, you know why it's happening. You should not be doing these 3 steps until you are sure the behavior is happening for a certain reason. 1, you're going to have some proactive strategies. These are also known as prevention strategies. Preventative. How can I prevent that behavior from even happening in the first place? 2, you're going to have some teaching strategies. What do I want them to do instead of the problem behavior? And it has to be the same function. It has to have the same or bigger payoff if you're going to expect it to work. So instead of crying for a cookie, I want to teach that they ask for a cookie. And then I have to deliver because I want to teach requesting rather than crying. So every time they request for a cookie, I better give a piece of a cookie because I want to strengthen that. And now I want to stop giving cookies when they cry for them. That's your 3rd step, withholding reinforcement. So once you know why it's happening, you're going to make sure that's your extinction procedure. You're going to make sure those behaviors are not going to work anymore. So we now feed the positive behavior and we starve those problem behaviors. In other words, we give a really big payoff for those behaviors we're trying to teach now, those good positive behaviors, and we have no payoff for those problem behaviors. That is your main goal, and you're going to achieve that in those 3 steps for any function, any behavior. So stop and think. When you're dealing with problem behavior, you need to stop and think. There is not a same method. You're not going to reprimand and punish behaviors out of somebody. It's not going to work. What does problem behavior get them? What does appropriate behavior get them? And now how can I feed the appropriate and starve the problem? Think about that grocery store example in the beginning. Is there a payoff for the appropriate behavior? If there's a bigger payoff for problem's always going to win. So you need to make sure that, again, you're starving the problem behavior. That's not going to work for you anymore. And you're going to feed the thing that you want to see happening in the future. How do you do that for escape behaviors? Well, I only gave a few strategies for each, but preventative behaviors, we talked a lot about this if you were in our instructional control webinar. Basically, how can I take whatever it was that was aversive, a person, work, a situation, a social thing, a certain environment, a loud noise. How can I take whatever that thing is that created an escape and avoidance behavior and make it not anymore? Make it something that's enjoyable. Make it something that's not so aversive. If it's work, then there's instructional strategies for you. Fade in demands, mix and vary across different tasks to keep it fresh. Not 8 math problems in a row, and then eventually I'm going to get tired and bored of it. It's going to be too hard. Reduce the amount of work. Shorten the duration of work. But this is all before problem behavior. This is not after problem behavior. This is preventative to prevent it from happening. So there's instructional strategies you can do. You want to also enrich the environment with student preferences. That's going to, again, if you can enrich the environment or that activity with fun things that they love, make the worksheets look a little bit more fun, put superheroes on there, have their favorite things in the classroom, make the lesson really engaging. When you enrich the environment with student or child preferences, that's going to prevent escape behavior from happening. You can provide choice within an activity. If you provide choice within the activity, it's likely they are going to feel in control, and now I'm not even going to engage in problem behavior because you're giving me choice. You're going to also condition aversive things with reinforcers and gradually expose them. So, okay, you don't like vacuums, and every time you see a vacuum, you run away, or you don't like crowds of people in the grocery store. I'm going to now gradually expose you to that, but I'm going to make it reinforcing and fun. I'm going to have a toy vacuum sitting around, and every time you walk by it, I'm going to give you tons of attention and praise, or I'm going to give you access to something you love because you did it and you tolerated it. Slowly condition. Don't remove all the vacuums and put them away. That's the worst thing you can do, because then again, you're living that restricted lifestyle. You have to work through them, condition these things, turn something that's aversive into something that's enjoyable. There's your prevention strategies. Next is your teaching. Now, what am I going to teach them to do instead that still gets them to escape and avoid? Functional communication and differential reinforcement. Those are the two strategies we're going to talk about for every behavior. Functional communication, that means you're going to now teach them appropriate communicative response in order for them to get access to what it is they want to escape or avoid. Can I have a break? Can I have help? Can I finish it later? Leave me alone if it's a social or a person they're trying to avoid. All of those you're going to teach first. You're going to contrive situations, you're going to prevent the adversive, and you're immediately going to prompt that request. I give them the math work and I immediately say, can I only do one problem? Can I have a break? Can I have help? I present them with a person or a peer that they really don't like, and we immediately teach them to say, leave me alone or move back. And then eventually over time, we'll build up their tolerance. There's still other things we'll do, so they're not just telling everybody in their life to leave them alone. But it will immediately replace other problem behaviors. Always want to teach communication to replace problem behavior. And then your differential reinforcement. That's all that means, again, is that feeding and starving. I am now going to feed and provide the best maximized reinforcement I can when they do communicate instead of engaging in problem behavior, or when they cooperate and complete the task without any problem behavior. I'm going to not allow any escape, and I'm going to starve behavior and not give any reinforcement when the problem behavior happens as a way for them to escape. So feed the communication and cooperation and starve the problem behavior. And then you're going to make sure, again, that you always do your extinction, your withholding reinforcement. So you've got your prevention, you have your teaching strategies, and now you're going to make sure those problem behaviors never work for them to escape an environment or a task they don't like. Keep them safe, repeat the direction and the demand until you gain cooperation. Don't mistake this for forcing somebody to do something. You don't want to use a lot of physical prompting to force them. Just wait, be patient, and continue to repeat it. Attention, same 3 steps. What's my prevention? These are going to be a little different than escape because, again, function-based. Different interventions for different functions of behavior. So your attention behavior. Prevention strategies before that occurs. I know that kid is very attention-seeking and they engage in problem behaviors for attention. I'm going to make sure they have a high rate of attention throughout their day just because. Have fun, engage, greet them at the door when they come into the classroom, when they wake up in the morning at your home. Have a lot of fun attention that you give them, especially if you know you have meetings that day and there's going to be limited attention. Flood them with attention when you can. Flood them with attention when they're doing positive, appropriate behaviors. Enrich their environment with things that are going to give them attention. Jobs, being the door holder, passing out papers to their peers. Any activity you can think of that gives them attention. FaceTiming with a relative, giving something to a neighbor, whatever it might be that allows them that attention, enrich their environment with those types of activities. And then provide opportunities when you can facilitate it to get attention from their peers, from their siblings, playing a game, lunch bunch, playing. But it has to be giving them opportunities to get good, positive attention. Then you're teaching, again, your functional communication and differential reinforcement. I'm going to now teach them the right ways to get attention. And what it should say there is calling someone's name, saying, excuse me, raising their hand, tapping somebody on the shoulder, saying, look at me. We'll make sure we change that when we give you guys the webinar, but those specific requests are to get out of something or escape. What it should say there are requests that allow them to get attention from somebody. And that, again, raising your hand, calling someone's name, asking them, can I play with you? Can we talk? All those requests that would give them access to attention, because that's what you want to feed now. You want to use your differential reinforcement. You want to feed and give the best reinforcement when that communication happens. Instead of them calling out, throwing something at someone, pulling your shirt and hitting you to get your attention when you're talking to somebody. Starve that problem behavior and now feed those communicative responses and feed the more appropriate ways to get attention. And then just like your extinction for escape, extinction for attention-seeking behaviors looks like what we might call planned ignoring. You are not going to provide any attention, and this is so hard for people to do because kids do outlandish things and say a lot of outlandish things to get your attention and get a rise out of you or get a rise out of their peers. You are going to ignore it. Because even if you yell at them or reprimand them and tell them that's not appropriate to say and that they need to pay attention, you just gave them attention. You are going to ignore it completely. And you're going to train your siblings or your peers in your classroom to redirect and look at you and try to minimize the attention they're giving that behavior as well. No attention when problem behavior happens. Make sure they're safe. No eye contact, no conversation, no form of attention until that behavior stops for at least 5 to 10 seconds. And then appropriate behavior is shown. Once appropriate behavior is happening again, where you see a hand go up or they say, excuse me, now start to reinforce and feed that behavior. And then lastly, oh no, I think this is our third. Behaviors that happen in order to get something that they want. That's your tangible function. What's your preventative strategies? Well, you're going to make sure you have a lot of things in their environment that they do love, that are preferred items, that are people. The more that they have around them that they love, the less likely they're going to engage in problem behavior to get things that they want. Condition new items and activities for the child to like, so they have a nice big array of things that they like. And also provide many opportunities throughout the day for them to get access to things that they need or things that they like, to teach them to request for it instead of engaging in problem behaviors to get it. So here's your functional communication. Again, you're just going to contrive situations for them to request these things, but it's going to be requests that get them what they need. Chips, cookies, can I have the pen? The teacher tells them to do an assignment and they need to get their book and their book is missing. Where's my book? Teach them functional communication that will replace the grabbing or the taking or stealing of items, whatever they're doing to get what they want. And then you're going to do your differential reinforcement. Again, feed the appropriate communication. They're asking now for things that they want, honor it. And in the beginning, honor it every time and then gradually fade it out and only honor some of the time. But you want to strengthen communication and not problem behavior. So feed and provide lots of good reinforcement for communication, and now starve those problem behaviors that were happening before by blocking access to the things that they want and not allowing anymore for them to have things that they want because after engaging in problem behavior. The other thing I added here for behaviors that are happening for them to get what they want, sometimes it's not, they could ask and they really just can't have it. It might be something they're asking and you don't even have in your house, or you can't go and get that thing, or they're out of that flavor that they want at the ice cream store. It's not going to happen. You can't get it. You used your words, but you still can't have it. You also, for this behavior, want to be working on teaching waiting and tolerating no. And when we give you this webinar, I give you a little explanation on how you do that. But basically, you just set up trials in order to teach them to wait and teach them how to tolerate appropriately when they can't have something that they want. That's something you want if your child does exhibit behaviors with this function. Withholding reinforcement, again, your extinction, you're still going to do extinction for tangible. That means do not allow access to people, items, whatever they want when they start engaging in that problem behavior. Do not allow it anymore. Block access to those items, remove those items, wait for problem behavior to start for at least 5 seconds, or to stop for at least 5 seconds. Once there's no problem behavior, you can then prompt the request and deliver. So I'm crying for a cookie. I'm ignoring that. I'm blocking access to cookies. I'm looking away. I'm not giving any. I'm starving that crying behavior. They stop for 5-10 seconds. I look at them and I say, you can say cookie, sure, here you go. Now I'm going to feed the communication response while still starving the problem behavior. Last one is sensory. So your prevention strategies for sensory are going to be enriching the environment, but with preferred sensory activities, movement breaks, walks, sensory bins, blowing bubbles, whatever it is that really gives them input, deep pressure, hugs. This is where I always say, always consult with an OT whenever I see a sensory function when I do an FBA, because they're the experts in this, and they're really going to be helpful to let you brainstorm what appropriate activities would be to enrich someone's environment. Frequent engagement. So if you are, during activities or environments where it's more likely to happen, a lot of times in large group, I see these behaviors happening with kids. I have to tell the teacher, active responding. You need to have them engaged more, give them jobs to do some call-ons with them, do some whole group choral responding. If there's engagement, sensory behaviors are not going to happen as much. Condition items and environments that increase fear and anxiety with reinforcers and gradually expose. So again, you're making those environments and things that they don't like and immediately produces some internal events, and you're gradually exposing them to them with reinforcement. And then you have to make sure you have reinforcers in your environment that compete with sensory seeking behavior. This is the toughest behavior because it is very hard to compete with. If I can sit here and TV talk or wiggle my fingers or chew gum or hand flap, I don't need you to get reinforcement. I don't need fun things. I don't need my teachers. I can get reinforcement on my own. So we have to try really, really hard with students that have a lot of sensory seeking behavior to condition and reinforce a lot of things that have similar properties. If they like shiny things, then we're bringing in lots of shiny things and we're showing them lots of shiny things and we're trying to pair ourselves up with it. You have to compete with it or you're never going to be able to do instruction when you have that high rate of sensory. Functional communication can still happen with sensory behaviors, and that might be if the sensory behavior is happening because they're trying to remove something that's aversive. It could be them asking for headphones to now be able to go into the cafeteria or the assembly because they're reducing a lot of that sound. And now they might not be engaging in that self-stimulatory behavior now. It could be asking for Tylenol if we do know they have headaches and they can tell us that their head hurts. Let's ask them for Tylenol or at least express my head hurts rather than engaging in self-injurious behavior or other ways to remove it. Ask them for hugs, for squeezes, for jumping on the trampoline. Ask them to request for the things that give them that sensory input. So again, you're replacing some of the self-stim with some communication and the access is coming from us. Same thing, differential reinforcement. Feed and give reinforcement when those sensory seeking behaviors are not happening. Provide lots of reinforcement when they're not happening, and you can withhold or minimize reinforcement when self-stim is happening. Now, again, we're not trying to get rid of all self-stim behavior. Everybody has it, everybody does it. I don't want to say that self-stim behavior is bad or I'm trying to change your child in any way. Absolutely not. If it's not interfering in their learning or they don't have a lot of verbal behavior skills and we're trying to build them, that's totally fine. Since it's going to happen. Self-stim behavior is going to happen. But if it interferes with their learning, then we are going to minimize reinforcement. And the way you do that is through response, interruption, redirection. A little bit different than your typical extinction. You want to interrupt that sensory seeking behavior and redirect it. Ask them a question, put a demand on that is incompatible with them being able to do that. Have them hold something instead of flapping hands. Have them answer a question instead of engaging in scripted TV talk. So whatever you can do to interrupt it. The only way to stop reinforcement from happening for sensory behaviors is if you interrupt it and you engage them into something else because it's self-reinforcing.
Before we start case study practice, I just want to say thanks, Kim. I feel like and I'm going to speak for Annie as well, always learn from you. Like every time you do a presentation, talk about behavior, and parents, we hope you guys gain something as well. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you have a home team, talk to them as well. Look over your child's positive behavior support plan if they have one. Some of the strategies that Kim just reviewed will also be outlined in there. And also, I'm going to reiterate this again, tip of the iceberg. This is a big topic, no quick fix, but we do want to give you guys some starting tools to be able to analyze behavior and change it. So we are going to guess the function. So we're going to look at 4 different case studies, and we are going to decide if the function is sensory, escape, attention, or tangible. So here's our first one. Alex is in 2nd grade, and his teacher asked the class to open their books to page 14 and complete problems 1 through 4. Don't forget to explain your answer. Alex starts to groan loudly and says, "I hate this." The teacher reminds Alex to have a quiet voice and continues the instructions. Alex puts his head down, refuses to complete the math work. When instructed by the teacher again, he breaks his pencil in half and rips the page. So what is the function? And actually, there should be a consequence here. The consequence should say, and Alex, the teacher removed his math book. So that would be the consequence here. So what's the function? I'm going to give everybody about 15 seconds to think about it. All right. So the answer is escape. So if we look over back at our example, in green is going to be our antecedent, and in red is going to be what the consequence is. And that's what you want to look at when you are analyzing the behavior, to determine the function and what the interventions that you want to put in place are. So the antecedent to his behavior was that his teacher asked them to open their math books and explain their answers. He engaged in multiple behaviors, groaning loudly, saying he hated this. He broke his pencil, and the consequence was that Alex was able to finish it later. So she reinforced his escape behavior. He completely got rid of the task, and that's why the function is escape.
And I just want to reiterate again, I know we went into it a little bit, but maybe not as in depth about what evokes and maintains behavior, but it's your consequence. The fact that that teacher told Alex he could finish it later, that's what's going to make it happen in the future. Not that the math pages are presented. That will evoke it. But until that teacher stops allowing him to avoid and escape work by ripping it, it will still happen. And I often have people tell me, well, I'm doing all the preventative strategies and they're still engaging in it, because you're still removing it after problem behavior. So it will still happen no matter how many prevention strategies you put in place. The problem behavior will still happen if you don't withhold and starve reinforcement from the problem behavior.
All right, case study 2. Annie is a kindergarten student. She loves pizza and she'll do anything for it. Annie politely asks her mom for pizza, and mom says, "Not yet." Now Annie runs into the kitchen and opens the fridge where the leftover pizza is. Her mom shuts the fridge door and says, "Annie, it's not time yet." Then Annie throws a tantrum and screams, "Pizza!" What's the function? I must have forgot to add the consequences back in, Kim, but the consequence for that would have been, after Annie screamed pizza, the consequence was mom gave her pizza. So what's the function? Sensory, access to tangible, attention, or escape? Give you guys a few seconds. Right, so the answer is access to tangible. So again, let's look at our antecedents in green and our consequence in red. So mom tells Annie not yet after she asks for pizza. Then mom shuts the fridge door and says it's not time yet. So those are evoking the other behaviors of running to the fridge and screaming pizza. The consequence is mom's now gives her pizza. She got what she wanted. Mom reinforced her screaming behavior, her running to the fridge behavior. And that's, again, like what Kim said, we want to look at the consequence and what happened directly after her screaming pizza was she got access to the tangible, or to the food. All right, case study 3. Layla is a 3rd grade student. During class, Layla raises her hand to answer a question, but her teacher calls on another student. Next time the teacher asks a question, Layla stands on her chair, but the teacher chooses another student. The next time Layla's teacher asks a question, Layla runs out of the classroom and her teacher tells her to come back. What's the function? Sensory, access to tangible, attention, or escape? And the answer here is attention. So again, antecedents in green is her teacher is calling on another student, evoking the behavior of her standing on the chair. The teacher again chooses another student, which actually was a good response. She didn't call on Layla for standing on her chair. She didn't give her attention that time. But the next time, Layla runs out of the classroom and now her teacher tells her to come back, which reinforced that running out behavior. And this example also kind of can be what an extinction burst could look like. That behavior is getting worse and that teacher is like, I can't let her run out of the classroom. So now she just reinforced that the worst behavior out of that whole entire scenario. So you want to really make sure to catch those good moments as well. All right, last one. Case study 4. Theo is a 6th grade student. Theo is in science class and the teacher is delivering a lecture on atoms. Theo is clicking his pen throughout the class. Theo continues to click his pen during independent work. That's when lecture stops. And then Theo continues to click his pen during small group work. What's the function? Sensory, access to tangible, attention, or escape? So the answer here is going to be sensory. And if we look at the antecedents, there's a lot here, a lot of different ones, a lot of different environments, a lot of different contexts or circumstances that are happening. So he's in science class, lecture is happening, independent work, and then there's small group work. And under all of those conditions, he's still clicking his pen and it doesn't stop. The consequence wasn't added in the last scenario for a reason, because the consequence is self-reinforcement. So clicking the pen provided or relieved sensory input for Theo in some way. So that makes it sensory.
And that's why it's so important to think function, because Theo clicking his pen could be an attention-seeking behavior. Say there's a peer in his class that he really doesn't like. He thinks it's funny when he gets him all riled up, and every time he clicks his pen, that peer next to him yells, "Knock it off, Theo. Theo, you're so annoying." And then he keeps doing it. So it really is important, and that's what we tried to really make sure to give you the foundation in this training, to stop and think. Stop and think about what those antecedents are and what happens immediately following the behavior. Because if Theo was clicking his pen and right after Johnny said, "Knock it off, Theo," or the teacher said, "You need to stop doing that," it's very likely it's attention seeking, not sensory. But the fact that this continued, nobody said anything to him, it continued in multiple activities, even when the lecture stopped, it didn't turn it off, it's not escape. So it's not the topography of behavior. Clicking a pen could serve every function. Self-injurious behavior can serve every function. You're not going to find your interventions or your quick fix or what to do just by looking at a behavior. It has to be what is evoking it, your antecedent, what's continuing it, and your consequence. You've got to start looking at behavior through that lens to figure out what is feeding this behavior, what is the payoff, what's working, what are they getting from it. So if you're having a lot of challenging behavior in the home, I'm hoping you can kind of start to take this mindset and start to be a little bit of a problem solver and think function, because if it's happening, it's happening because it's working and something is keeping it going. And your job is to starve it and feed something else that's more appropriate based on the function.
Right, and as we said, to be continued, there's a lot of other strategies, a lot of other, interventions and things to talk about in terms of problem behavior, managing it, and preventing it. So we are going to continue. This is part 1. Who knows how many parts there could be, but we want to continue to keep providing training in this area for you guys. All right.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Watching, whatever it is. Always feel free to reach out if you have questions, and we're still going to send out a survey. So if there's something we didn't touch upon in this one, let us know so we can incorporate it in the next part of problem behavior. We're hoping to answer some of your questions in our webinar next week and spend the first kind of 30 minutes or so answering your questions that you may have after watching this. But also, again, feel free to give us feedback or email and let us know if there's something specific you want covered in regards to problem behavior.
Perfect. All right, thanks, guys.